Hello again. This is Marshall Sanders. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thankfully, this is probably going to be in the next three videos. The last three videos that I'm going to talk about the victims as well as the heroes of slavery, as well as those involved in the White Matrix. I will then, after these three videos, proceed to tell you for the long awaited solutions that will be not only good for people of color, but subsequently be good in unconceivable ways of many for whites. And yes, that includes economically good for each white family. Now, I have a question I wanted to bear to each one of you. So, easy question, or so it will appear. When did slavery end in America? As a side note, did you know that roughly 95% of Americans have no idea when slavery ended, or at least the official story? Did you know that? Well, what if I told you that slavery in America did not end officially until 2013? Would that surprise you? Of course not, would it? Because otherwise you would not be listening to this series, which I call the White Matrix. Because if the answer was very easy, well then you wouldn't be learning that for the first time here. So if your answer was in 1865, obviously you know now that that answer rather would have been incorrect. But you're going to ask, how is that possible that 2013 officially was the last time that slavery ended in America? Let me read you something first. Well, a few things first. But the last state that ratified the 13th Amendment of 1865 was, well, a state that it shouldn't surprise you, Mississippi. We all know that Mississippi, even to this day, practices slavery. And before I read this particular report, I had a question for you. Or I should say another question. What state rather, is known in all of America as a place where most blacks are incarcerated falsely? If you guessed Mississippi, ding ding ding, ring the bell. What a surprise. Now, this is not to offend anyone in Mississippi. No individual should suffer for the effect of an entire state government position. No policy. Though, of course, they do bear the brunt of some of these things since it is a citizen's responsibility to keep its government in line. Nevertheless, let me read you a quote by a person who actually found out, a professor even, who found out that Mississippi had never ratified the 13th Amendment, and thereby making Mississippi known to have not done something they should have done 150 plus years ago. Let me read his situation. Notice that this guy, by the way, is not a white Mississippian, but rather someone else. Dr. Rehan Batra, professor of neurobiology rather, and anatomical science of the University of Mississippi Medical Center, told ABC he was inspired to investigate the history of the 13th Amendment in his state after the viewing of the film Lincoln. Pardon me. At the end of the story, there was an open question about how the ratification process proceeded, he said. Living in the South as I do, I found that a pretty big open question. So Batra proceeded to do some investigating of his own, noticing on the website onconstitution.net that there was an asterisk next to the state of Mississippi in connection with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Mississippi ratified the amendment in 1995. But because the state never officially notified the U.S. Archivists, the ratification is not official, reads the statement on the website. Mr. Batra felt compelled to act to rectify the clerical oversight. Mississippi gets a lot of bad press about this type of stuff, and I just felt that it is something that should be fixed, and I saw every reason that this could be done. Everyone here would like to put this part of Mississippi's past behind us and move on into the 21st century rather than the 19th. This guy wants to put behind this oversight. Ladies and gentlemen, do you really think that was an oversight? Honestly, that governor after governor and people after people, it was an oversight. Oh, we just got so busy. If it was affecting the white citizens in a negative way, you think that would have stayed on the books? You think it would not have been something that they put as a priority to correct? But let's move on. Here's a page that I wanted to read about the 10 ways that slavery actually, in practice, continued after 1865. Now, here's the thing. Most people say 13th Amendment and don't even know what the 13th Amendment says. You do know that the 13th Amendment did not outlaw slavery in America, don't you? I'm sure you educated people know that. But how about you uneducated? Let me read what the 13th Amendment actually says. Because in order to come out of this white matrix, you must be educated on the actual language and truth of something and not what you've been told as a narrative. Let me read the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Did you catch that? I'm going to read that again. Because anytime you have a document that says except, well, then you're making something called exceptions. And when you make exceptions, you're making opportunity. 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Ever been to Mississippi and some of these other southern states where chain gangs existed and continues to, and the labor that they get from them for free as punishment for crimes? And you wonder why so many blacks in Mississippi and such other places are convicted of these crimes and given long sentences. Slavery by any other name is slavery. So, I wanted to make this video to give us an understanding on what we're dealing with here. But for those who are still stuck in the white matrix and you cannot see nor hear, I have something as an article to give you 10 quick ways to know that slavery continued in America, even, in fact, to this day. Just a slavery in a different name. 10 ways. This is an article I'm reading on listverse.com. If you would like me to list it for you, please let me know. I will do so. And I would ask that if you do come to this article, that you actually read everything and its explanation on what they're saying. I'm quite certain it would be shocking to many of you. But 10 ways American slavery continued long after the Civil War. Slavery was used as a legal punishment. Many freed slaves worked on the same farms for the same wages, which is, well, if you are not getting any wages, kind of self-explanatory what that means. Sharecropping made slaves through debt. And I would love to do a whole thing on just that alone, but unemployed black people were forced to work without pay. Well, that was through vagrancy laws. You really should look that up. Fake apprenticeships. Yeah. Work for me a while. Be my apprentice. You'll get a position. Never happened. Confederates or Confederate people took their slaves to Brazil. So slavery literally continued, just on a different land source. Black workers were locked up and beaten. Don't see what's going on over there. Blacks couldn't testify against whites. Well, white people could get away with massacres and theft and rapes. And number one was on their site, Mississippi didn't ratify the 13th Amendment until 1995. Now, many of you will say, well, I'm certain, I am absolutely certain also that this ratification process that in which you speak of, I'm sure that this was a oversight, right? And the angels rejoiced it. And it was just an oversight by these states, and things like this happen. Let me give you a date, if you will, for when other states ratified. Now, a few of these states were non-existent at the time. And out of the 36 states that were at the time, 27 of them ratified it. So good on the 27 states that actually ratified it. But there were those who did not ratify it. And I would like to bring to you the states that did ratify it and when they ratified it, just to give a little context to what I'm just speaking about. Oregon ratified it in December of 1865, so same year. Likewise, California ratified it in December 1865. Likewise, Florida got around to that in December of 1865. Iowa got around to doing that in 1866. Texas, or I should say New Jersey, got around likewise to doing that in January 1866. Texas took 4 more years, but Texas finally got around to doing it in February of 1870. Now, Delaware, certainly Delaware would get around to it pretty quickly, being one of the original colonies. So Delaware got around to it in, February 1901. Well, Delaware, that's 435, 36 years later. Okay. The last two were Kentucky. Well, Kentucky got around with it pretty quickly. Kentucky got around it in March of 1976. So that's only, 110 years later. Coincidence. Because we know that Kentucky continued with chain gangs and free labor, slavery, if you will, for a long period after that. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence. It took them 110 years to ratify that. And finally, Mississippi, which we've already mentioned, signed in 1995, 130 years later, but not certified until 2013. Now, the point of this video is entirely to do with the white matrix. Because so many of you have believed for such a long time that slavery was such a long time ago, we should put bad memories to rest. But the point I'm trying to make is that slavery not only continued on paper, but it continued in practice. So when you say you're looking for the victims of slavery directly and saying, well, that it was so long ago, the victims have died by now. The truth is, if you open your eyes, if you look, you will see actual, standing, living, breathing examples of slavery. Not so far away from you at all. So, in continuing this series on the white matrix, we're going to go further. We're going to go next to seeing the victims. Hopefully we can see some faces. But we're also going to see victims from other races. That's right. White faces even, of the white matrix. And as you heard me mention many times about the Quakers and their struggle, which continues today for equality amongst the sons and daughters of men, of God, rather. Well, we have to identify the victims of this white matrix and do what we can to bring them out of the white matrix. Because often those who victimize in the pain and suffering of having been victims themselves. We who are people of color recognize that in ourselves, that we also at times victimize those having been victims of ourselves. Thereby, we should pass that same standard of understanding and reparations, if you will, to those who have been victimized. You see, it is easy to go to war with someone. You don't even have to have a cause. You can simply go to war. It can be from anger. It can be from greed. It can be just. But at the end of the war, the question that must be asked is, who is the victor? You've seen the bloodiest, most attacking nation in the history of mankind in the United States of America. Our government has warred off of its property, not even in defense of its land, more times than even Rome carried campaigns. Because the United States is not built on peace and love and spreading the gospel of freedom and the democracy that it says it does. Interestingly enough, just by another question, why is it that we're spreading democracy when the United States is not a democracy? The United States of America, if you do not know this, is a constitutional republic. The so-called founding fathers found the idea of democracy, which was something that the French rose as a standard during the time that they were cutting off the leadership's heads, as an utterly abominable choice of government. In fact, it has been famously stated that they said the reason why they would never consider a democracy in this country is because their recognition that no democracy had existed longer than 200 years in a standing order. So why is it that our politicians and our people go around the world saying that we're spreading democracy? Well, maybe they mean democracy of cutting off heads. But I digress. This series is about to get serious on reparations, on fairness, on justice, and on solutions. So continue to stay with me. Continue to understand that I had to get here. The last few videos I told you I was cutting the heart out of the situation of the Matrix. And now we're just moving along, and we're about to open up the insides of this and find out what the cancer is so that we can remove it. And finally, have our cure. Until then, the next video should be very soon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you for watching this video. Also, if you have any comments or anything that you would like to speak concerning or would like for me to address, or any information that you want to find out that you would like for me to provide validation of the words in which I spoke, please contact me. Please visit us at American Patriots Against Tyranny on Facebook and let us know that you saw our video, or rather, my video, on YouTube. Thank you very much. Again, have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you for joining me.